Great. All right, so now I'm going to hand it over to you. Okay, perfect. Hey, welcome everybody. This is the fourth, I think, in the series of online sessions that we're doing. We did a Warbler 101, Sparrows and Ducks. And this is Raptors 101. And this is Margie Menzie is our guest from Hawk Ridge. And I am also on the board of Hawk Ridge, so I get to see Margie every now and then. But for those of you who, a little bit about UBC, we started in 2018. So we're going on about 8 years, and we bird all year round. We do about 80 to 90 events each year. We support a lot of organizations. We partner with about 30 organizations, and we support bird surveys, bio blitzes. We're big into the winter bird count. We put in about 700 hours, just our leaders alone. I have about 45 leaders. All of our leaders identify as either BIPOC or LGBT, majority of both, which is pretty cool. And then another big project that we're doing is the chimney swift monitoring. And so this year we have almost 100 volunteers. And the volunteers this year are all over the state. And so we have a really nice contingent up in Duluth, Margie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really exciting. So we'll be doing some swift sits up there. But yeah, that's a little bit about us, and I'm gonna hand it over because I don't have to do anything tonight. I get to just listen and monitor the chat. So if anybody has any questions while Margie is talking, just put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. We'll save some time to do some Q&A at the end. So I'm gonna hand it over to you, Margie.
Alrighty. Is everybody seeing the screen okay?
Yep.
Alrighty, good, good, good. Well, we are gonna do a little bit of quickie, what's Hawkridge and what are we doing and what's happening now, and then I am going to dive into the Raptor ID 101 with you all. This one's going to be a little different than my normal Hawkridge thing, which is more about kind of how things are structured and that sort of stuff. So be patient. I had to redo a bunch of things, and yeah, I'm excited. It'll be fun to go through this. But warning, Raptor ID could be a 3-day workshop, and we have less than an hour, so we're gonna stay with the what you would see if it was flying overhead version of Raptor ID 101. So here we go. Duluth is an amazing place. It's a 365-day-a-year bird town, and there are all kinds of birds for inspiration. These are from year-round picks, and you can kind of quiz yourself on the birds that you're seeing there. All of them are interesting critters, and we see through the course of a year all of them. Um, Hawk Ridge, most people are familiar with the fall count, which happens on the ridge line on the east side of town just before you head up the North Shore. And that's an amazing spot. That's where we kind of got our start. Hawk Ridge has always been known as an amazing place to see lots of birds. And yeah, the story goes that the duck hunters used to use Hawk Ridge as target practice, and they would shoot bushel baskets of dead hawks and all that kind of stuff. And um, early on in the process, there really wasn't protection for migratory birds at all. And this fellow, um, Dr. Pershing Jack Hofsland was the first ornithology professor at UMD. He came in the late 40s, early 50s, and he quickly honed in on what was going on at Hawk Ridge. And he said, we should be studying these birds, not shooting them. And he started a campaign, and the story goes that he would go out every single day with cardboard signs that said, please don't shoot the birds. And every day they would disappear, but every day he'd come back with more. And he soon had a key group of people interested in what was going on. People had always been kind of interested, but the Duluth Bird Club formed, which later became the Duluth Audubon Society, and they were able to take a creative approach with the city council and basically got the city council to declare shooting birds or shooting in city limits illegal in Duluth. And so that stopped the shooting. um, Hawk Ridge Nature Reserve was formally established in 1972, and that's when formal counting began. Up to that point, we've done a lot of informal stuff, and so there are lots of years of early records. But starting in 1972, we started very set procedures and count from the same period of the year to the end. In the fall, we run from August the 15th through the end of November. In the spring, we run from March the 1st through the end of May. And the spring count was a little bit later in the process, and we'll talk more about that here in a sec. But yeah, 2026 is our 54th year of counting, banding, studying, protecting, and educating all about birds. So yeah, our mission is to protect birds of prey and everything else that migrates through, which is a pretty substantial population. Every year, roughly 3 to 5 billion birds leave the boreal forest, adults and young birds migrating to places south. That's a lot of birds, and we are really kind of the beginning of this central flyway, or what we call the Mississippi Flyway. Birds are coming predominantly from the boreal forest, and they're following um, big bodies of water. They're following mountain ranges, working their way around weather systems, and many of them will stay in habitat as long as they possibly can. And in the boreal forest, yeah, you could, coming from the Northwest Territories in Canada, you could head straight for south, but you'd be in the prairies and the mountains, and that's unfamiliar territory. So most of the birds are going to stay in that boreal forest, which is going to sweep them all the way down to Lake Superior. When we hit the big lake, many of those species are not thrilled about flying over massive miles of open water with no advantages for soaring birds. No thermals, no place to land, nothing to eat. So most of them are going to stick along the landline and funnel right down the north shore of Lake Superior to Duluth. And Hawk Ridge is one of the top 2 or 3 sites in the country for this. Pretty much you have to go significantly south of Hawk Ridge to down into Texas, Corpus Christi area before you find counts that regularly count as many birds as we do. So this is an incredible place in the beginning. I always think of it as the beginning of the Central Flyway, but it's been going for quite a while by the time it hits us. So that's kind of from the north scenario. Now, when the birds are coming back from the south, the spring migration is totally different. You can see, gave you the map here of of the US, and these birds are generally coming from the Gulf of Mexico and coming up, and they're not funneled in the same way. So we typically see fewer birds as a whole in the spring than we do in the fall because that funneling isn't there. That said, though, there are a number of birds that we typically see more of in the spring than we do in the fall. And we've only been doing spring count monitoring for a few years. Um, we we did a formal series of counting in the spring from 2000 to 2006, and then had a brief hiatus in there and eventually got a good sized donation to get us counting routinely in the spring starting in 2018. And we've been counting routinely every year since. Um, and some would argue that counting and keeping track of what's happening in the spring is even more critical than the fall because what we're getting are the birds that have survived the migration and are coming back to nest. So they're the survivors of migration. They've already made their trip down and they're on their way back. So, yeah, it can be pretty substantial. Here's a couple of graphics that illustrate what's going on. The one in the bottom right is just normal area radar, and those little green circles that you see are at night. You can pick those up on the local radar, and those are generally birds. They can be bats and dragonflies and things like that as well. But those little small round circles are birds moving through and a variety of other things that could be moving at that point. The weather systems, you can see that in the bottom of that map there. It's kind of that yellow band. That's what a weather system looks like. The image on the left is um, 11 years of spring migration traffic via radar heading north. And you can see that a huge chunk of the birds that migrate use this central flyway. They estimate 60 to 75% of all of the birds that migrate in North America are using this flyway from the Gulf of Mexico north. Um, and they don't really have any great geographic things to help them fly north except for the Mississippi River, which many of them use. So, yeah, there's fun stuff out there. I love telling people about Birdcast. Some of you may already be familiar with that. That's a cooperative program between Cornell and a variety of other weather forecasting people, and you can look on their website and get a prediction of what's going to happen. So this is the prediction for tonight's migration. Approximately 163 million birds are predicted to do some moving tonight. You can see that there's a little bit of weather in between the Gulf and us. So, but there's a significant amount of yellow up there in Minnesota, so we should be getting some more birds coming through. Excuse me, I got a dust bunny. Alrighty, so that's tonight. There's the prediction for tomorrow. The weather's going to move out and things are going to be better. And then the following day, yep, we got weather back again. So fun stuff to take a look at. And you can find that, like I say, if you hit birdcast.org on the website and you can look those things up. The other thing that's really interesting that they do is provide you a dashboard of what happened last night in your neck of the woods. They can do that by county. This is actually from a couple of days ago when I started working on this program. Birds that crossed St. Louis County that night, which has actually been the biggest night thus far of spring migration. 1,281,700 birds moved over St. Louis County alone that night, according to their estimates. So it's really kind of cool to take a look at this, and you can see where we are in the scheme of things, when most of those birds moved. Can you see my pointer on the screen? Or is that just
Yes,
something I can
yes,
see?
we
Oh,
can see
good.
it.
So you can see that they moved predominantly in the early part of the night and then they kind of puttered out after that. This kind of gives you an idea of which direction they moved and how fast, how far up. They were up pretty high as they were moving through. And then how are we doing so far? Well, that was the biggest night of the season so far. And yeah, you can see from this part, we've got a lot more to go. Um, so that was Monday night into Tuesday, which was a big night. And then this was last night from, so it was a little quieter, only 718,600. But you'll see numbers that just will blow your mind on this. So there's a lot of stuff happening out there in the spring migration. So our spring migration counts don't happen in the same site as our fall count, and there's a couple of good reasons for that. One is that road is closed off and not plowed in the wintertime, and when you have a spring count that starts March the 1st in Duluth, that's a problem. The count site there is inland a little bit too, and so we're not geared to see what's coming from the south quite as well as we are seeing things coming from the north and down the North Shore. So we have two count locations. One of them is close to Inger Tower, and the other one is on Thompson Hill, and both of them are on West Skyline Parkway. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. Why two in the spring and not just one? Well, it turns out that the birds move differently depending on what's happening when the wind is blowing hard off the lake. Um, when the wind's coming from the east and the northeast, the birds tend to come up and then hit the lake. And so instead of trying to go over the lake and dealing with that massive headwind, they take advantage and they use the St. Louis River corridor and actually use that wind as a tailwind and push them forward, and they'll buzz down the river for a ways and then cut up between um, the highway. You'll often see them when we're counting up at Thompson Hill, you often see them flying right over the highway, and there's a little cut in there, and that just works perfectly when the wind is hard off the lake. Otherwise, we are at Inger Tower, which gives us a wider spectrum of everything that's moving. But like I say, when it's hard off the lake like that, the Thompson Hill site is better. So that's why we count in two different places. And so far this season, as of about 5:15 this afternoon, we've counted 9,100 raptors for the season and 14,395 of all different types of birds. We count everything, not just the raptors, everything else as well. So, yeah, lots of stuff going on, plenty of birds moving as they're coming through. This is our spring count site up at Inger Tower. And we also, like I say, use Thompson Hill. And the last week or so, it's pretty much all been Thompson Hill. Lots of east wind. But the birds in the spring are different than in the fall. In the fall, if the birds that are soaring birds are trying to move through, They'll just hole up and wait for the weather to change until the winds get better. But in the spring, they can't afford to do that. They have to move anyway if they want to get to their breeding territory before somebody else takes over their spot and makes it impossible for them to use what they've traditionally done. So a lot of birds will go back to the same locations year after year after year. So they need to get a jump on that and they will keep boogieing right on through. So here's a little mini quiz for yourself. I have four different kinds of birds here, and I want you to just kind of think about, I'll tell you who they are. Um, I want you to think about which birds are going to come when, and in your mind, kind of rank these in order. Who's going to be first, second, third, and fourth? So on your upper right is a red-tailed hawk. Here in the middle, this is a northern harrier. These are trumpeter swans up in the upper left. And down here is the osprey. So take a minute here, just a 30 seconds or so, and kind of arrange them in your mind as to which one you think is going to be the first ones we see in the spring migration coming through, who's next, and so forth. All right? I can hear the wheels turning from here. All righty, everybody got a pretty good guess going? Anybody want to chime in with who they think is first? It's okay to unmute and speak
Yep.
up.
Yep. I'm going to let somebody else take a guess. So anybody who wants to unmute?
We got the shy crowd this
I
evening.
know. Come on, Jill, pretend you're at bird trivia. Well, I'll guess, Margie.
All right.
I'm gonna say red tail first,
All right.
Porter swan second, northern harriers, and then the osprey.
You're about half and half. Turns
Okay,
out the trumpeter swans are some of the first birds
first.
to come
Okay,
through. So they're going to be ahead of the red tails
okay.
just by a hair. It's pretty close. And then you're right. Northern Harriers would be third on the list, and then finally Osprey. Um, yeah, these guys are looking for unfrozen water, and it doesn't pay to get going too early up here.
Mhm, mhm.
So, yeah, and patterns of movement of birds. How do we predict who's going to come when? Well, in spring migration, the birds that we typically see are the ones that I call regional or short distance migrators that haven't gone very far in the first place. They just kind of, some of them will hang in the general vicinity. For example, in Duluth, if we've got open water all year, they'll stay here in the harbor all winter long. Bald eagles will do that. And there's always a red-tailed hawk or two that do that as well. So the short distance ones will come first. The adult birds, for sure, in the spring before any young birds that were born last year. Males will sometimes come before the females. And then our long distance migrators are usually last to come through. And it's exact reverse in the fall. The ones that'll get started going in the fall are the long distance migrators. They'll go first and then they'll send the young ones ahead saying, okay, it's been good to know you. Hope you do okay. Make good choices. Now scram, you're on your own. And they send them off ahead of time. And then females will generally follow that ahead of the males in many cases. And then again, at the end, you'll get the ones that really aren't going very far. So it makes for interesting stuff. And I took a graphic that I'll show you in a sec, um, that Frank Nicoletti did the first study from 2000 to 2006 of spring migration. I turned it into this graphic that's a little more visible to the eye, and you will see listed are the birds that are coming through, and the green ones are the adults, and the blue ones are the young ones that were born last summer, or birds that we can tell that are not in full adult plumage yet. And you can see that those young birds are coming significantly later in most cases than the adults. Um, there's a couple on here that are kind of interesting. Osprey, for example, there's no young coming. Really? Well, that's true because Osprey have figured this out. Those young birds typically stay down in the Gulf and wait until they're mature enough to breed, and then they'll come. And so, in general, we don't see the young birds from the osprey because they're smart. They stay down there on the Gulf until they're old enough to do that breeding. Um, Other birds like kestrels, there's no blue on there, and that's because by this point in the kestrel world, they all look the same. There's no significant difference between the young birds and the adults by this stage of the game. So it gives you an idea. So you get kind of the first guard here, and then kind of the middle, and then you get the end of the later seasons. Um, and here they are. So, in order of appearance this year, just for fun, I kind of whipped through and said, okay, when did we see our first birds of the season are always bald eagles. The first ones that were migrating were recorded on February the 16th. We didn't count officially starting until March the 1st. Doesn't mean we aren't watching. Some of us can't help it. We watch and see anyway. But yeah, on the official first day, there certainly were bald eagles, but also red-tailed hawks and golden eagles, rough-legged hawks by the next. But here's the first round of birds. Here's kind of the middle of the road pack. So we picked up merlins and Cooper's hawks and turkey vultures, harriers, kestrels, and peregrines more in the middle. And then our late coming later birds tend to always be the osprey and the broadwing, and they didn't get here until April the 13th was the first, and that was Monday this week. So yeah, here's the original table that Frank published in the Loon back in that block from 2000 to 2005. I'm sorry, I've been saying 2006, but it was 6 years. It's just, it goes to till 2005. And this is what I used to make that graphic, so it's a little easier to read. Basically, if you look at this, you can see the earliest that we've seen that species on average when that is, and the latest, and then when we last see them, and in general, where are most of the birds coming through. So lots of interesting stuff going on. All right, are you ready to dive into Raptor ID 101? How can you tell who's who? Well, it can get pretty complicated. So, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to concentrate to stick in mostly with the in-flight birds from you on the ground looking up. Perching birds could be a whole nother session that we'll have to do at a different time because it's just way too much for an hour's presentation. So let's dive in. Um, if you're looking at this picture, this is a picture of a kettle of birds. Can you see more than one type of bird in there, or do you have any kind of concept of what you're seeing in there? Um, this one is pretty much all one type of bird. It is the bird that we typically see the most of every fall. And depending on the year, it can be what we see the most of in the spring, too. Depends. Um, these are broadwing hawks. and they're all broadwings in this picture. There's nothing else in there. This next picture, on the other hand, um, it's got a little more diversity in it. Take a look at it and see if you can pick out some things that look things. One of these things is not like the other's game. Our counters, when they're counting, honestly, they're amazing. They can start tracking birds sometimes 2 and 3 miles out, and they're looking when they're counting predominantly at shape and behavior. How are they acting as they're flying? It's usually not very helpful to try and estimate size because if you're looking at a bird way off in the distance and it's the only thing in the sky, it's going to look huge to you until it gets close, and then you're going to be like, oh, okay. So, yeah. Anybody seeing different shapes in here that look different enough from the others to you don't have to fess up to what you think it is, but there are definitely a variety of birds in there. Predominantly, it's turkey vultures, broadwing hawks, and Swainson's hawks. This is not a Hawk Ridge picture. There will not ever be lots of Swainson's hawks in a kettle that forms over Hawk Ridge, but I did want to get one that had some diversity in it. And there's also, if you see this one here, do you see that big long tail on it? That one's probably a harrier coming through. So there's definitely some different stuff. So let's go to work on it. Um, I like to look at families of birds and their general flight behavior, and we're going to spend a little bit of time with that. And I always tell folks it's the soarers versus the flappers. Um, Soaring birds are built for highly efficient flight. They don't have to flap very much if they play their cards right. These are usually longer, broader winged birds with shorter fanned out tails. And we're going to take more in-depth looks at these guys in a little bit here. But the family of Bootios, which includes red-tailed hawks, broad-winged hawk, red-shouldered, rough-legged Swainsons. Those all are Bootios, and they're going to be those long, broad-winged, shorter, fanned-out tails. Bald eagles and golden eagles, turkey vultures and black vultures, which are very uncommon. The black vultures are. Turkey vultures, there's a bazillion of those, but not very many black vultures. Um, and then ospreys. So these are our soarers. These are the ones that in the fall would wait for really good winds. In the spring, they aren't going to wait. They're going to make use. Duluth has this fantastic ridge line that is really useful for those soaring birds. And we typically see more of the soaring birds in the spring than we do of the flappers because of that ridge line. When you have a ridge like we do here in Duluth, a very distinct spot, there is always going to be lift going up the hill. So the birds can always grab lift and head up the hill and get some height for free just by the physics of the situation with that ridge line. We do have some in-betweeners. Northern Harriers kind of fit. I always say they're kind of a little bit of both. They do a bit of both soaring and maneuvering. They still have longer wings, but they're narrower. And they also have a longer tail typically than the Bootios. And they usually fly with it not fanned out. So Harriers are kind of the in-betweeners. And then the flappers are the birds that are built for speed and maneuverability. They usually have much shorter wings, um, long tails that usually aren't fanned out. Once in a while, you'll see them fanned out, but most of the time they're going to be pretty tight like a plank back there. And these are birds that typically hunt on the wing. They don't land and grab something, they typically grab it in flight, which includes the falcons. And yes, yes, this is a new piece of terminology in the world of raptors, accipitrines. We used to say accipiters, and we put Sharpshin hawks and Cooper's hawks and northern goshawks, now they're American goshawks, together in the accipiters. But they just recently moved the Sharpshins into well, the stay accipiters and the Coopers and American goshawks got shifted into their old family of Astra and are not considered technically accipiters anymore. So yeah, a little taxonomy switcheroony going on there. Fancy stuff, and it's related to DNA. And if you're into that kind of stuff, I can recommend there's a app, a website that you can go to that's called One Zoom, and you can go to the birds and you can see who's most closely related to who and how they developed. And you will see if you go in there that it will be Sharpshin hawks, and you have to go a ways before you find the coops and the American goshawks. So that's really fascinating. Things are changing and shifting around, but now the politically correct way to say accipiters, since they're not all accipiters anymore, is to say accipitrines. So there you go. Bird taxonomy fun. Alrighty, so let's introduce you to the Buteo family. And really, we see mostly only three of these. There are two in there that we don't see very often at all, but we can. Um, so, yeah, anybody want to pick anything out? Get brave.
I can guess the top right red shoulder hawk.
Very good. I put that one in for you, Metro folks. Because we see practically none, but they're all over the place down your neck of the woods. So cool. Good. That's a red-shouldered.
The one that is to the left down is a rough-legged hawk.
Yep, this one right here is a rough-legged hawk. Beautiful. And we'll talk more about how we're telling the difference. It's good when you see them all on the same page like this to start to begin to look at what is different about those birds. One of the things that you'll typically see in all the Buteos is this dark edge on
Hmm.
the wings all the way around. That, if you look at all of these guys, they all have that. They're all Buteos, but what else they do, this big blob on the roughies comes at a different spot than it does for this one. Anybody know?
The belly band, the red-tailed hawk.
Yeah, this is a red-tailed hawk. All right, which leaves us this fellow over here.
I'll let somebody else guess. Anybody?
I'm going to tell you
I
more.
I
Bueller?
can I can try.
Go for it.
I'm pretty sure it's a Broadwing.
You're right. And then down here in the corner is a not very frequently seen, but they are on the list. So
That is
we,
Swainson's.
Yes.
that is a Swainson's. Yeah. So let's kind of dig in a little more deeply into things to look for. Now, it would be nice if they all looked exactly the same, but there's this little thing about adults versus juveniles or young birds that were born this year. Um, and the other thing that can enter periodically is male versus female. So we'll try and tell you a little bit more about this. One of these guys is an adult, and one of these guys is a juvenile that was born that year. Um, yeah, if you look at it, you can probably make a pretty good guess as to who's the juvie and who's the adult. Um, In general, juvenile birds are not as clearly marked as the adults are. Um, and if they've got stripes, they tend to be more densely striped. This is a young bird over here. If you look at this tail, see that it's really kind of lacking that full black band that you can see on the adult over here. This one's got a nice solid dark black band, and this one's kind of not there yet. And you can see there's a lot of stripes on it, whereas here there's about four, and that's all you can see. This one's probably got seven or eight. So this is a young bird feature. And all of the speckling under the wing and a speckled belly, that's a typical young bird kind of feature. But in general, looking at broadwings, they're dark all the way around, but they really don't have any other distinct markings on the underwings of these birds at all. Um, Anywhere along the shoulders and that sort of stuff. It's just lacking that. The tail is really easy to see that nice broad stripy tail. You can see that on the young bird, it's kind of more streaky and they're kind of vertical. Um, Up and down the belly, whereas an adult, they're more horizontally oriented. That theme's going to turn up a lot in young birds. So yeah, darker head, kind of chunky little body there. These guys are the smallest of the bootios in North America. Um, and they're birds and their favorite kinds of things to eat. Um, They'll eat small birds, small mammals, but their really favorites are reptiles and amphibians. So yeah, garter snakes and frogs and toads and stuff. So that's a broadwing, and these typically are the birds that we see the most of in the fall. On average, we generally see somewhere in the neighborhood of 25,000 or more broad-winged hawks in a fall season. That's
Carmen,
about average.
I hate to say it, but we're at quarter two.
Oh my gosh. All right. I'm going to move faster here. Holy smokes. All right. Keep moving. Here's red-tailed hawks. Um, Young bird is on the right side and the adult is on the left. I've given you the Abeta cola or the northern boreal forest version of the red-tailed hawk. This one is a guaranteed migrator. If you look at red-tailed hawk range maps all over, you'll see they're the everywhere bird, but they have all kinds of other things going on that we'll talk more about in a bit. Um, Rough-legged hawks. Trivia question. Why are they called rough-legged? It's because they have feathers all the way down to their tootsies. Many of the raptors have bare lower legs and significantly longer legs that aren't feathered. These guys are boreal forest birds for sure. This is an adult male. Rough-leggeds will always have this big elbow patch out there. This is a young bird. Again, look at the difference between the tail and this one. This is a young bird. This one, um, dark belly like this in the adult is going to indicate a female, but young birds often have that dark belly as well. So there's a little bit on the rough-leggeds. Swainson's hawks, we don't have a ton, but you see this dark edging. This is the adult, and this is the young bird. Again, lots of stripes, not very well defined, lacking that dark edge, and lots of specklies, ill-defined stuff. So there's the young ones. Red-shouldered, the adult is got that rusty red cover in the underwings and on the belly. Young birds, again, that vertical versus horizontal striping. Um, Much less marking here and none of that dark stuff. And yeah, again, those tail stripes are not well developed. Alrighty, here you go. You got eagles, bald eagles on the left, and golden eagles on the right. They can be pretty hard to tell apart. A lot of people think that golden eagles are significantly bigger than bald eagles. I am here to tell you that they are almost exactly the same size, and there's no way you can tell that from looking at them. So, um, you have to look at other things. And yeah, there is a little white on the tail for this is the young bird on the golden eagle. This is the adult. You'll see that golden head on the adult, and you won't see it on the young bird to that extent. You can see white up here in the upper edge. If you're going to see white, it's going to be on a young bird and it's going to be further out on the wing. In the bald eagles, the white is always under the pits, the armpits, the underside of the wing is going to be white. And there's an amazing assortment of variants on those young birds. It takes the bald eagles a full 4.5 years to get to full adult plumage, which we're used to seeing. A lot of people think that juvenile bald eagles are actually golden eagles, and they're not. Some of them might be, but you got to get good at looking at where that white is. If it's in the pits, it is not a golden eagle. Vultures, turkey vultures always have that lovely silver edging, and the black vulture's just that silver tip or grayish tip. The other thing that will be a dead giveaway for vultures is dihedral flight. Put your arms straight out and then put your hands up. V is for vulture. You're making that dihedral flight, and we'll hit that just quickly here in a sec. Here's an osprey. Osprey will always look like an M or a W, both from the shape you see from this side. And if you were to see it coming head on, this would go up and down, up and down. So you would actually see it either way coming at you. Big white belly, um, dark markings here, and the back part of the wing and the tips of the feathers. All right, here's our in-betweeners, northern harriers. There's that longish tail. Um, this one is one where you can tell the males from the females. Oh boy, oh boy. There's a boy, there's a young bird, and there's an adult female in here. Who is who? Well, this is the adult male. They call those guys gray ghosts because they're gray, blue on the back, all the way across the back, and these black wingtips are a dead giveaway. That's a male. This is a young bird. They are lovely. They are one of my favorite birds in the hand in the fall. Lovely chocolate brown color on these young birds. And the adult females will be very brown all over. So there we go on the Northern Harriers. Um, and notice that big owly face. Pretty cool. Here's the accipitrines. And in the accipitrines, they all have similar things. Birds that have vertical striping are going to be young birds. This is a young bird. This is a young bird. This one is a young goshawk. This is the adult. They're chunkier birds. Their bodies are every bit as big as a red-tailed hawk, but their wings are narrower and a longer tail. This is a Cooper's hawk. The rounded tail is what you want to look for on a Cooper's, and the head's going to stick out and be more prominent on a Cooper's hawk. This is a sharpshin. This is a young bird, and the head just doesn't stick out very far. And the elbows usually are more prominent here. These two pictures aren't really good for getting at that. Usually the Cooper's is going to be straighter across the front here. kind of does a better job on this side than on this side. Yeah, it's a complicated world identifying those raptor fellas. Here is a kestrel and a merlin and a peregrine. Things to look for here. These guys are flappers. They will come through in just about any weather because they pretty much have to flap through no matter what because they just aren't built for soaring. They're built for speed and maneuverability and hunting on the fly. Um, we always say that kestrels look like floppy banana peels when their wings are flapping. Merlins fly like they're late for dinner. And the peregrines, they are a little more sedate, much bigger birds, and they're a little not quite as speedy on their wing beats as the other two. So there's the falcons. Oh, time, time, time. So, yeah, that's the basics, but then there's funky things that birds do to keep us well and thoroughly confused. In addition to males and females and young birds versus older birds, there's dark morphs and light morphs and subspecies. Red-tailed hawks are kind of the master of all of that. There are more subspecies and dark and light morphs of those guys than anything. I put dark morphs out here of all of these guys. This is a dark morph red tail. This is a dark morph broadwing, dark morph rough-legged, and a dark morph Swainson's. On the Swainson's, it's really just the body that's gotten dark, but on the others, you can see that all of the underwing is dark. So yeah, that'll keep you jumping. And then there's the good old tuck and glide mode. Turkey vultures usually look vastly different than bald eagles, except for when the wind is intense and there's a lot of turbulence that they're trying to overcome, and they'll dig into that tuck and glide and just boogie right on through. And the bald eagles and the turkey vultures, if they're not close to you, will look exactly alike. Ha! Who signed up for that anyway? Then there's dihedral flight. And yeah, the turkey vultures win the prize. V is for vulture, but a lot of these other birds do a little bit of it too. So I would put this one at the highest level of dihedral. I would put northern harriers at the number two position, and then yeah, then I'd probably put rough-leggeds, which is this one, and then I'd put golden eagles. See how the tips of the wings on both the rough-legged and the golden eagle are slightly tipped up. So that complicates things. And then oh yeah, then there's the hoverers that play like helicopters. These guys can all do it, and these are shots of them doing it in their finest. Kestrels will do it. They're probably the best of the bunch at it. Um, Rough-legged hawks will do it. Northern harriers and osprey and red-tailed hawks. And I put the kites in here. You might have a few Mississippi kites on occasion in the Twin Cities. We sometimes get them up here as a random kind of bird that pops through. Alrighty, here's the report of today. Um, at the count, 353 sharp-shinned hawks, 666 red-tailed hawks, and they were still going when I pulled this, so I don't know what the final total is. We can look at the very end if you want to, but
That's
yeah,
just today, Margie.
that's just today,
Oh my gosh. Okay.
2,691 individuals.
Wow. Okay.
Crazy, crazy, crazy. Crazy lot of birds coming through. Here's the top flyers, the top 10 so far for 2026. Um, Number one, 3,328 bald eagles. And this will shift as the season goes on. Red tails are doing pretty good right now. These numbers are the total count, and these numbers here are the highest in a single day. And you can see on um, the 13th of April on Monday, we busted wide open the single day count. This is the largest ever single day count for turkey vultures in the spring. The previous record was a um, piddly 677. So, yeah, 62 more birds to make it 7,000 or 739 in a single day. So, just to give you an idea who our prop early season flyers are, we're starting to get a lot of pelicans in today. There was more than 100 on the count today. So, lots of fun stuff happening. All right, I thought I'd throw a quiz in here for you, and we're totally running out of time. So I'm just going to whip through these and you can make a guess quick. And then I'll come back and I'll tell you what they are. Quick, quick, quick.
Rough-legged hawks up top.
Yeah, Ruffy.
And then a
Uh,
Broadwing,
yep, Broadwing. Good,
Merlin, and a red tail.
good.
Osprey,
Osprey and
golden.
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 Yep.
Ooh, a tough one. Is it a, that's a, is that a sharpshin? Or is that
Yep,
a
that's a Sharpie.
sharpshin?
Yep.
And is this a morph of
This
something?
is a dark morph red tail.
Red tail, yeah. Cool.
And here?
Bald eagle
Yep.
and
Oh,
bald eagle.
Bald eagle, bald
the
eagle.
the one on
Just
the
wanted to
right.
give you an idea of the variety that can happen in there in the different years. And that first one that we didn't say, this is a,
American kestrel and a female northern harrier.
nope, this is a male.
Male. Oh, because it's gray. Yep.
Yep. And it's got that black wingtip.
Mhm.
Yep.
Gorgeous.
Nice job. I'm impressed. So, yeah, can you tell this could be a week-long workshop?
Yeah, no, that was good. Um, Thank you, Margie. I'm opening it up for questions. So what question?
Yeah, and I thought I'd stick in just quick. There's a couple of nice free resources out there if you want to dig into Raptor ID stuff. Hawkwatch International has an app that you could put on your cell phone that's free. There's the website to go to where to find that. And then there's also a free printable Raptor ID guide from Cornell. I didn't have time to make a lovely link there, and you wouldn't have it anyway. So, yeah, just go looking at Cornell on All About Birds, and it should pop for you if you start looking at raptors on the list. So, all right, on to questions.
Questions. People can just unmute and ask your questions.
Sure. Would be nice if you unmuted. I always hate talking to everybody but nobody. It's sort of a bizarre thing.
And while people are thinking of their questions, one of the things that's, Margie talked about, especially the fall, Hawk Ridge is known for its fall migration. And really, you go up there, there are spotters, there's staff that will tell you what you're seeing. So you don't have to like think that you have to know everything. They will tell you way in advance. They'll see it off in the distance, and you'll be amazed. And then it will come through. UBC, the Urban Bird Collective, will be up there a few times. I'll Once I get those dates set, you're more than welcome to join us. And then there's also the Hawk Ridge Annual Festival, which is, do you have the dates of that, Margie?
That is always the third weekend in September.
Okay,
Um, and I think it's like the 24th, 25th, or 22nd, 23rd. I don't know.
that's the third weekend.
Yeah. A third
And it's
weekend.
great. Lots of trips, lots of classes. So yeah, we'll be sending more out. But who has
Yeah, and the spring count is just as fun as the fall count, even though we see fewer things. Things that we see more of in the spring, I haven't told you that yet, but I did mention that we tend to see more of the soarers. We tend to see more bald eagles in the spring. We see more turkey vultures in the spring. We can see more red-tailed hawks in the spring. So yeah, those are some of the normal ones that we often see more in the spring than we do in the fall.
awesome?
So yeah, come visit the spring count, and you can always go on Hawk Ridge on our website and get a live count update. That's always fun to do. I was tracking it today as I was working on other stuff, and yeah, I'm always like, how come I'm always stuck in the office when it's a crazy, crazy moving day? But there we go. So yeah, and you can look on that, and on the bottom of the Trek Talent page, like I showed you for today's count, it'll tell you where they are, if it's at Inger Tower or at Thompson Hill. Today they started out at Inger and then they moved to Thompson and stayed. And it'll always say that. So if you don't know where to go, look there.
I may be seeing you sometime this spring.
Yay, I hope so.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think you were so amazing that nobody has any questions. So I'm gonna stop the recording. Oh no, you have to stop the recording, I think.
Oh, I'll stop the share. How's that? And then you can stop it. There we
See.
go. Because, yeah, I think the recording is still on your end.
Okay. Let's see.
Yeah, and we didn't even get into the backs of the birds. We gave you the belly look. There's just so much. That's the reason I chose to work at Hawk Ridge is that I didn't know anything about raptors. That was 16 years ago, and I'm still learning.
For some reason, I can't stop the. You are still the host.
Oh, okay. I can stop the recording. Are you sure? Yes, and it should be recording on your end. Hopefully, this isn't going to screw things up. Maybe what I'll do instead is make you the host again. Let me think about this. Oh, I got to remember.
Go to my name and you should be able to hit the
Oh, and
more.
right click and make you the host. There you go. Thank you for the reminder. I haven't done that in a while. There you go. Now you can turn it off, and then we know I won't screw up your recording.